Hello everyone, my name is Winda Josefina Simamora. I am from the 6th group. Want to present our presentation. I'm a speak 1 and the title of our material is Koller Linguistic Orientation Approach. Being under the influence of neither science of translation state that there should be an equivalence relation between the source language text and target language text. He makes a distinction between equivalence and correspondence. Correspondence means falls within the fields of contrastive linguistics, which compares two language systems and describes contrastively differences and similarities. Its parameters are those of source language. Example given by Koller and the identification of false friends and of site of lexical, morphological, and syntactic interference. Equivalence relate to equivalent item in specific ST and TT, pairs and context. The parameters say that of source parole. Koller point out that while knowledge of correspondence is indicative of competence in the forage language, it is knowledge and ability in equivalence that are indicative of competence in translation. However, the question still remains as to what exactly has to be equivalent. In attempt to answer this question, Koller goes on to describe 5 different types of equivalence, and the 5 different types of equivalence will continue to the next speaker. Thank you.
I am Riris Romauli Pasaribu, and here I would like to explain you about denotative equivalence. So, what is denotative equivalence? Denotative equivalence is one in which the source language and target language word refer to the same thing in the real world. This is the referential identity between source language and target language units. Jadi, denotative equivalence itu merupakan suatu kesetaraan di mana bahasa sumber dan bahasa sasarannya itu, kata di dalam bahasa sumber dan bahasa sasarannya itu merujuk pada hal yang sama di dunia nyata. And then, denotative equivalence is equivalence of the extra-linguistic content of a text, otherwise called content invariance. For example, a rabbit, the Great Fire of London. And the second example, for the target language, eat. Search language, makan. So, makan means to take food in through the mouth to clear and swallow in turn. This word has exact meaning with it. Jadi, makan in search language has the exact meaning with it in target language. Okay, in here there are some example of denotative equivalence. The first example, for search language, she died because of cancer. The target language, dia meninggal karena disebabkan oleh kanker. And the next example, for search language, he was a welding. For target language, dia orang welding. Jadi di sini ini diterjemahkan dengan menggunakan istilah yang sama dengan bahasa sumber demi menjaga kesepadanan tersebut. So, welding in search language has the exact meaning with welding in target language. And the last example is for search language, barista kami akan siap untuk menyeduh kopi. For target language, our barista will be ready to brew your coffee. So, because denotative equivalence is related to the equivalence of the extra linguistic content of a text, jadi karena kesetaraan denotatif itu berhubungan dengan kesetaraan extra linguistik dari sebuah teks, maka berdasarkan based on the example of barista, kami akan siap untuk menyeduh kopi. The Indonesian word menyeduh means that to make or mix tea or coffee with hot water. This word has exact meaning with the English word in in the English word in the target language with which is Braille. So, menyeduh in search language has exact meaning with Braille in target language. So, ini termasuk ke dalam denotative equivalence. So, that is all about denotative equivalence, and next will be continued by my friend. Thank you.
Okay, now I will continue with the connotative equivalence. The connotation conveyed in the text carries the culturally normative feelings or association evoked by a specific term or phrase, and by different level of usage or styles, or social and geographical dialect. The example of connotative equivalence. The connotation evoked by the term breakfast in an English-speaking context may differ radically from the association this term evokes in Islamic countries during Ramadan.
Okay, I'm Putri dari Simanjuntak, and I will continue our materials about the text normative equivalence. Text normative equivalence, this is related to parallel text in the target language. In other words, it aims at following the norms and patterns required by each text or by each language in a variety of communicative situations. The linguistic and textual norms of usage that characterize a particular text. Okay, the example of the text normative equivalence. The example of the text normative equivalence is a letter layout differs widely across linguistic and cultural communities, and this needs to be taken account of in translations. Okay? The next material will be continued to the next speaker.
I'm Jessica. I want to explain about next types. It's talk about pragmatic equivalence. The definition of pragmatic equivalence. Pragmatic equivalence in translation is the perfect model to build bridge between cultures. And hence, the culture and social concept have to concentrate without misguiding the TL readers. Green opinions that the meaning of the lexical item is an utterance is not fixed by a linguistic system. It is entertained by the help of the context. The translator takes the clue for the meaning from the context. Pragmatic equivalence will have the translators to understand the text beyond the textual level and help to understand how the utterances are used in communicative situations. The concept of pragmatic equivalence. The interpretation of semantic relations can be understood by understanding the pragmatic concept. Different societies and groups of the individuals within the same society have the different experience. The concept in one society may be different in the other. Fixational meaning cannot help a translator understand the whole concepts of the source. In order to analyze the real meaning of the text, one has to analyze deeply the contextual meaning along with age, mood, culture, situation, and anything else of the search language and the target language. Nida points out, translation can be defined as an act of interpretation of the meaning of a content and consequent reproduction of equivalent content. Next, the example of pragmatic equivalence. The first one, from the source language, be aware of the dog. Target language, waspadai anjingnya. The second one, source language, she has had her blood. She is old enough for the cow. For target language, dia sudah datang bulan. Dia cukup tua untuk sangkal. The third one, source language, no rose without a thorn. For the target language, tak ada gading yang tak retak atau tak ada yang sempurna.
Formal equivalence. Formal equivalence is related to the form and aesthetic of the text, including wordplays and the individual stylistic features of source text. This is achieved by creating an analogous form in the target language, using the possibilities of the target language in relation to its forms, or even creating new ones. Formal equivalence is usually used in translations of poems, songs, etc.